The big upset finally lands. A big beatdown makes a statement, and the ACC Wheel of Destiny is back. This is the College Game Day podcast for Monday, October 30th. Rece Davis and Pete Thamel here. Pete, great to have you back on the pod. You were away on assignment last week, landing that Michigan plane. And while a lot of other things have happened, and I guess that plane is still circling a little bit, how would you describe what covering that story has been? I mean, you've covered so many major stories. You've broken so many things. Your investigative chops are beyond dispute. How would you characterize this entire experience of the Michigan saga and story?
It's been really interesting to cover as a reporter, Rece. It reminds me a little bit like in the same archetype of the Cam Newton story that unfolded must have been, 12, 13 years ago now. In terms of like the stakes, right? The stakes at Michigan are the highest right now. And when Cam Newton's eligibility was in flux that year, would that have been, 07?
No, 10.
10, sorry.
When
yeah.
they won it,
so now 13 years ago. Just as that unfolded and spun, and like there was, the overlays and themes are somewhat similar, right? Like, is this going to impact a potential national title, an eventual national title season? Is, there was rumblings of the FBI being involved back then, going back to that year. There was, So I would think, in the 20 years that I've covered national college football, those would be the only two moments where the explosiveness of the story matched the stakes of the story, and there were just some wild twists and turns. And so we're now, as we tape this Monday morning, I guess we're almost 10 days into the Connor Stalions era, something like that. Like he emerged when we were in I think we were in Columbus that Friday,
before
game day. Yeah, it was Thursday night going into Friday, and then the story that Yahoo broke was midweek that week. So we're approaching the 2-week mark, I guess, of this thing, and it is gone at a pretty high clip in terms of rate and pace, and it'll be interesting to see if this week that things continue to spill out. So no, it's this will be the defining story of this college football season. Just because it will weave through the highest levels, because Michigan's really good. Like there's no disputing that. And so this is gonna. I would have a hard time seeing this story not be in lockstep with everywhere that Michigan goes. And I think I've said it on the pod. Like I think Michigan is going to win the national title. Like that's not. And again, that's not a hot take, right? I feel like you may be in that camp right now too. Like,
I am. Yeah.
You got to pick one right now. Hey, to your credit, Rece, you picked him number one to start the year. You saw the collective talent of what they brought back. But ultimately, I think this story runs through the end of the season. It runs through the college football playoff if Michigan does make it. And then it runs through the fate of Jim Harbaugh. I thought, Pat McAfee had some interesting comments on the game day set on Saturday that it will be really interesting to see if Jim Harbaugh, come spring football, is still the coach at Michigan. Just he's had his own NFL aspirations. He's had flirtations. He's had opportunity with the Broncos last year. Does this, now the 3 investigations lingering over Michigan impact his future there? Does it impact Michigan's future with him? So I just think like this story has legs, and it's going to have legs for quite a while. And really impact the sport at the highest level, impact one of the highest level programs in the sport. And it's just there aren't a lot of things like that I cover at this point and say I've never done that. Like I've never seen one quite like this.
It's a fascinating phenomenon, and Michigan has a game on Saturday, a rematch of the Big Ten championship game in a manner of speaking, I guess, and Purdue, team that they smashed in Indianapolis last year and will likely do again. And then Michigan's season will finally start the following week against Penn State. Whatever you think of the Nittany Lions going in there in that environment against a team that needs to prove its worth at the highest level will be a challenge. And in all honesty, the first real chance this season where you think, okay, this team is capable of beating Michigan if Michigan doesn't play to its level. And you also have to watch the cumulative effect. That's something I've tried to point out on game day. It's real easy to galvanize in the immediate aftermath of being challenged with something like this that calls into question how you have reached the level of success that you have. But over time, does it continue to galvanize? Are you good at blocking it out? Or does it start to chip away? Does it start to weigh on you? I think we've seen that multiple times over the years. And while this situation is not nearly as serious as the one involving Alabama basketball last year, in which there was a shooting that resulted in a death, they galvanized for a while, and then they started to take on the look of a team that was burdened by all of the things that were going on around them. Will that happen to Michigan? Again, please understand, in no way is the Michigan situation as serious as that. I'm just speaking to the human condition of dealing with outside things going on that weigh on your psyche, whatever level of severity they might be. Things can weigh on you, and particularly in a team setting, does it start to diminish performance? And we'll find out. Or, does it continue to elevate Michigan because they feel like, that they're going against everybody and people are out to get them. One quick thing, and then I want to spin it to last weekend. If Jim Harbaugh does go to the NFL, it was called to my attention on Sunday that, and you may have the particulars on this, Pete. I don't think it's really big time necessary to be precisely accurate here at this point because Jim Harbaugh is still at Michigan, not going to the NFL at this moment. But I believe when Jim Tressel ran into his issues at Ohio State and was out and then was hired as a consultant or some such thing, that there was a period of time with the NFL team that hired him, I believe the Colts, before he assumed that role. Someone brought that up as to whether the NFL would be a little hesitant to be viewed as, for lack of a better term, an escape hatch without imposing some type of pushback. If in fact Jim is offered a job, if in fact he takes it, if in fact all of this is proven to be of such great substance that it signals the end of the Harbaugh era. All of that's way down the road. Immediately they have Purdue, Penn State, and then ultimately Ohio State. Have Maryland in there too, which, by the way, laid a massive egg that everybody should have seen coming on Saturday, most notably those of us trying to catch up in a certain Superdog race. But I hated to go against Locks and Talia, but I had a little gut feeling about that, didn't act on it. Shame on me. I lose. Pete, one of the things that we've talked about the last few weeks on this podcast and on College Game Day is that there hadn't been a playoff altering season, the shape of the season altering upset that had occurred. Now, Kansas was unranked, but I believe Kansas to be a good football team. So it wasn't, like losing to a 2-5 team that Oklahoma did, but it definitely changed the shape of the season. The Big 12 race now, everybody, half the league almost, has one loss and they're all tied for first place, and that's going to start to sort itself out. But this was one of those losses to Kansas that happens in college football, but it also is one that helped the entire picture take shape. And for the first time, even though they won the head-to-head game, and I want to give them credit for that, I think Texas is better than Oklahoma. I left the Cotton Bowl thinking Texas was better than Oklahoma. Oklahoma just played its absolute A-plus game, heroic plays from Dylan Gabriel, and they pulled an upset in a rivalry game. And your ranking process can't be about one game. It's got to be about the entire season. I think Texas is better. I have them ranked ahead of Oklahoma now, and it really changed the outlook for whoever the Big 12 champion might be as it pertains to getting to the playoff, unless it's Texas that runs out the rest of the way.
Yeah, I think, one of the definitive takeaways from that upset, Rece, is now if we had to rank of the 5 major conferences who is least likely to make the playoff, the Big 12 has sort of asserted itself in that role just because of the simple fact they don't have an undefeated team left. So I think I'll start on that upset to be like, it was a surprise, obviously, but like Lance Leipold has brought Kansas back to such relevancy where like nobody was like gobsmacked, right? Like it was okay. It's an upset. It was historic. There were all the great numbers. think it was Jason Benetti and Brock Heward on the call that game. I thought they did a great job.
They're terrific, by the way. Both those guys are terrific.
Yeah, they did.
I hope we're allowed to talk about the competition, at least some of it. They're terrific.
Yeah, no, they did a nice job. And Heward at one point, like, did like the chill spine scene set, like, they haven't beaten the top 10 teams since 87. They like rattled them all off. And I just thought they really did a great job bringing it home. By the way, that game, like, I texted some people at Kansas, like, I was exhausted watching, right? Like, it was, because of the delay, because of like the weather, like, gosh, I hope Lance Leipold went home and had a nice cold spotted cow on his couch after, because he deserved Wisconsin native, or actually, spent a lot of time in Wisconsin, deserved a deep exhale, because that game was like a mini series in how it all unfolded. And man, Jason Bean, what a battler he is, and what a great like modern college football story. I believe that was his 25th career start. He obviously started at North Texas, I think, in 2018 and 2018. He's been around. You know what I mean? Like that mullet just didn't grow. That thing's been nurtured for a while. So, yeah, I think it sort of confirms some of our suspicions about Oklahoma, like just that they don't quite have that defense that, that is the level that we've seen Brent Venables build defenses before. They were a little light on talent on that defense. And yeah, I think, like, I mean, sign me up. Like, send us right back to Jerry World if we're going to get that rematch in the Big 12 title game. And not to dismiss anyone else's chances. Obviously, K-State could throw a wrench in things this weekend. They're playing really well right now, by the way.
Playing great,
really, really well right now. And Chris Kleiman won a lot of national titles at North Dakota State as a head coach and as a coordinator for a reason. That dude can build a team and build a program and get better. He is the best coach in the Big 12. And just don't think he won't have K-State ready. They have the Avery Johnson, the backup quarterback, who they've used in some change of pace situations. That is an interesting weapon for what will probably be, if Quinn Ewers doesn't play, like a low scoring kind of like slog of a game. It'll be fun to see what K-State has for Texas, because those dudes have won a lot of football games there. A lot of veterans. Whole O-line back. They found Giddens and Tail, but that's a nice program. I think that's going to be a heck of a game in Austin on Saturday night.
I do wonder though, Pete, because it was almost to the point where Will Howard and Avery Johnson were splitting snaps, but Howard's played really, really
Lights
well
out
since that started. He's responded to the challenge. Maybe it took some pressure off of him somehow, and he decided just to cut it loose. But, he threw 3 interceptions in that loss to Oklahoma State, which kind of got them going, by the way, which we'll talk about too.
Oh, yeah.
But he hasn't thrown, and he'd thrown one in every game before that, and he hasn't thrown one since. Texas had some trouble with Dylan Gabriel running. Now, a lot of that was scramble, escaping the pocket, but both Howard and Johnson have scored 6 touchdowns each on the ground. And we know, obviously, Kansas State's going to run the quarterback. I mean, look at who their OC is. So Colin Klein,
sure,
they're going to run the quarterback. So I think there's a chance. But the one thing, for all that Kleiman has accomplished, including winning the Big 12 championship last year, which people forget because TCU went to the playoff, they haven't beaten Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And Kansas State hasn't beaten them since 2016. And for all of the trouble that Texas has had with different programs, Kansas, for instance, Texas had trouble with them. They had trouble with Iowa State, beating Kansas State for whatever reason. So it'll be really something to see. They haven't allowed a rushing touchdown. They haven't allowed a touchdown, period, in the last 2 games. They've got a top 25 rush defense. Texas is going to want to run the ball. I think that one's really fascinating. And Pete, that Brett Yormark is rooting so hard for Kansas State against Texas and for Oklahoma State, speaking of running the ball, against Oklahoma, as they come in with Ollie Gordon, who, short of Barry Sanders' multiple back-to-back game runs, none of the other great Oklahoma State backs have done what this cat's doing. I mean, it's like over 500 the last 2 games. He's leading the nation in rushing now.
Yeah, I mean, the great,
with a little Halloween theme here, Rece, the great resuscitation of this college football season has been Oklahoma State. I mean, they were left for is Mike Gundy going to make it? Do they maybe have to make a hard decision on him? Because you go back to the end of last year, they lose to Wisconsin in the bowl game. Remember, West Virginia beat them in Stillwater, the game that might have saved Neil Brown's job. They got thumped in Bedlam. Kansas gobsmacked them, and K-State beat them 48-0. Like, they were reeling going into last year. And then the start of this season, South Alabama, which, by the way, has proven to be a pretty mediocre Sun Belt team this year. Mm-hmm. Like, they're not this isn't James Madison running undefeated in Wild. I want to say South Alabama's a 500 team. I mean, South Alabama smacked them. It was 33-7, but they essentially could have got shut out in that game. Lose to Iowa State, and then all of a sudden, you host K-State on that Friday night, October 6th, coming off a 48-0 loss to them last year. I'm thinking if they get blown out of their own building, there could be some changes. They at least would have to contemplate them. And now, again, Mike Gundy, a divisive guy, right? Like, just has always been, it might not be everybody's cup of tea, but he is an excellent college football coach and has been a consistently excellent college football coach at a place that's hard to win. And again, he's had some great stretches in his career and some great wins, but the 4 straight coming off of the no-show South Alabama and then the loss in Ames has to be some of his finest work, because the great coaches get their teams better, Rece, during the season. And Mike Gundy shifted the identity, and they're on a roll now, and they've clearly found a bell cow in Gordon.
As you know, because you had the misfortune of reading through this document that I send out, by the end of the day on Sunday. And a lot of times I'm sort of thinking about what I would like to talk about on the various games. If I get the on-camera leads that Kirk and Pat love to tease me about and stare at me and try to mess with me while I'm talking. But I was thinking about the Oklahoma State lead. And a lot of what you said is what I thought about with Mike. I've always gotten along with Mike well. I think the most remarkable thing that he's done over his time in Stillwater is that he's pulled teams out of the ditch. Yeah. He's pulled a program that a couple of times has seemed to be, okay, well, there you go. Mike's lost the edge or going in the wrong direction. The flirtation with Tennessee or whoever years ago didn't work out. Everybody's mad at him. He and Boone Pickens aren't getting along. Always thinks, it's going sideways. And he turns it back. He found, this small college offensive coordinator, and somebody came and stole and paid him more money. The same with the defensive coordinators. I mean, the guy he's got, I don't know, you probably do because you know everybody. His defensive coordinator there is a man called Brian Nardo, who's in his first year from Gannon College.
I can confirm I had no idea who Brian Nardo was when he hired him. Zero.
Yeah. So, I mean, here he is. He gets this guy, and it's in the line. He found Yurcich. He found Sean Gleason. He finds these guys and he turns it around, and he's out hunting rattlesnakes and pulling quarterbacks in and out. You may not like him. Go ahead. You may say he can't win Bedlam. You're right. He hasn't very often. 0-4 as a player, 3-15 as a head coach. That dude can coach, man. And, and there would be nothing more fitting and probably more satisfying to Mike Gundy than to end this era by beating Oklahoma. Because while they're Oklahoma State all time is 1991-1 against Oklahoma. I mean, you want to talk about dominance. That's kind of ridiculous dominance. But if you go back and look, I mean, the end of the Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams era, that's one of the 19. The final game, the final year in the Big 8 before they both left for the Big 12, they went together, so it's a little bit of an asterisk. Final year of the Big 8 before the Big 12, Cowpokes won. They spoiled a couple of national championship shots for them. 2001, Oklahoma at least had some designs of going back-to-back. They were 4-7, and the Hat beat them with Gundy on the sideline as an assistant coach. So,
I forgot about that Hat win. That was a transformative moment for the Hat's career.
Hey, man, they got them back-to-back years.
Yeah.
And back-to-back years sort of squashed whatever, was holding on, whatever national title hopes that Oklahoma was holding on to. Cowpokes got them. But then even, then there's a great moment. I hope we use this in the flashback. 1988 is often referred to as the greatest bedlam. Oklahoma won the game by 3. Barry Sanders on his way to the Heisman. He went for 215 yards. Ooh. 215 yards. And Pete, that was his worst performance over the last 6 games of the season. 215. 215. Anyway, last drive, apparently Barry Switzer got so nervous that he lit a cigarette on the sideline because he was nervous on the last drive as Oklahoma State's working its way down. And
I want video of that.
Yeah, I know.
That's a challenge to our game day crew. If you could find him firing up a Marlboro Red, that would make my weekend.
So they get down. I think I have this right. There was a 4th and 1, I think, that Oklahoma State had, or would have been a 4th and 1. There was depending on your point of view, a very questionable personal foul penalty that made it 4th and 16. In fact, I'm going to give you a sneak peek, and I'm going to see how many people on our group listened to our podcast. In the broadcast of that game, which, I thought maybe Oklahoma State was on probation, but at any rate, I dug this up yesterday. There was an analyst, a game analyst on the call who, when the personal foul penalty came out, said, unless you're absolutely positive, don't call anything like that to disrupt a great game like this. You know who the analyst was?
Lee Corso?
Yes, sir. Good call by you, Lee Corso. But at any rate, then Mike throws the ball into the end zone. Probably should have been caught, drop pass, and Oklahoma survived. But there's so much. The worst strategic moment in the history of Bob Stoops' illustrious career happened in Bedlam. Do you remember this one in 14?
I don't know if I remember the 14 game.
Catastrophically bad decision by Bob Stoops. They punt. They get a fair catch, to back them up. Oklahoma had the lead, just over a minute to go. Got a guy to call a fair catch. There was a running into the punter penalty, but it didn't give them a first down, just gave them 5 yards. So Bob decided to punt it again. Decided to punt it again. You know who the punt return man for Oklahoma State was that day?
It would have been Tyreek Hill, I believe.
It was Tyreek Hill. And Tyreek Hill housed that baby. They went into overtime, and the Pokes won in overtime. But there's so many great moments. It's a shame it's ending, but it would be so Gundy to make it an even 20 victories all time against the Sooners in this one.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like it's a fascinating one on a lot of levels. But you look at Mike Gundy, 19 years, 162 wins, 68% winning percentage, and look, like that is not a program. Now they have Boone Pickens and they have a nice stadium, but like that is not a program that's designed to win. Like you don't have a ton of natural resources in terms of geography, in terms of local talent and everything. And he has found a way to kind of defy gravity for a long time and deserves a ton of credit for that. Now, in the newly constructed Big 12, you could argue that's one of the better football programs, just if you look at history. But if you look at history before Mike Gundy, I don't really think you would argue that. Right. So that might be the best credit to his tenure there, that they have outkicked their coverage from their historical winning percentage so consistently that they're viewed through a completely different prism than the first essentially century of their program would have dictated.
It'd be pretty remarkable, and we're supposed to look back on Mondays instead of ahead, but it would be pretty remarkable if you have Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Iowa State, all of them sticking around, at least for the moment, after Saturday with a leg up on Oklahoma and Texas before they leave. I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying it would be interesting. Cornerstone program in the Big 12 going forward, I think, will be Utah, but Utah is not the class of the Pac-12 right now, because that game Saturday that Oregon went in there and Rice Eccles was alive on the sideline. Pete, you would have loved it. They were ready. And I mean, Oregon came out, chest bowed out, stuck their face in the fan, and they whooped them. I mean, flat whooped them. And I still have Washington rated ahead of Oregon. because of the head-to-head victory. They're undefeated. They deserve that. They earned it with a great game on the field. Washington hasn't looked the same since they played Oregon. I don't know if something took out of them. And Oregon still looks like I would pick Michigan right now. If not Michigan, I would pick Georgia. I still think Oregon and maybe Washington, but Oregon certainly is capable of winning the national championship. That was a tremendous performance on Saturday.
It really was, Rece.
And you have to think essentially Dan Lanning and what he's building in Eugene is very different than what Chip Kelly built in Eugene, right? Chip Kelly built it on speed and tempo. It was an innovative offense that was, I mean, they were literally a step ahead of like everybody for a while. Dan Lanning is really following the blueprint of how Kyle Whittingham built it, right? They are going to be a tough, power, balanced football team, dominant on the lines, and you don't go ragdoll Utah. It would be like they were joking on the game day set on Saturday. It'd be like, the battle royal with Kyle Whittingham. Like, that's not somebody you want to wrestle with. And they went in their house. How about 81 straight sellouts there? That number hit different. Like, for a program, and this is a compliment to them, that didn't have a ton of history, before really, they're in the Mountain West. They're a good program. Like, boy, have the people in Salt Lake rallied around that program. And I mean, that place looked like a snake, but the game day scene looked awesome on Saturday, Rece. It looked as deep and as vast as anywhere we've been in recent years. And it's hard to go into the venue of a team that's built on toughness and just simply body slam them. Mm-hmm. And that's what Dan Lanning and his team did. So all the credit in the world to him, Bo Nix, Bucky Irving, and the whole crew, because they put on that was a muscle flex, right? If you were going to sum that game up in a GIF, it would be one of those big duck D tackles with two muscles up, because they did an unbelievable job.
How about Lanning coming to the set in front of that crowd?
Yeah.
Which, the Utah crowd got after him. There is certainly an element of concern, because while most of them got after, all of them, because nothing happened, all of them got after him in a way that one would expect, and you can have a crowd of thousands, as we did. It only takes one knucklehead, to make everybody look bad. But Utah, instead, they did the smart thing. They just yelled at him. They did show their great appreciation for Dan Lanning coming and for his program by telling, there were a lot of guys in the front row that were telling him they thought that the Ducks were number one. And I was maybe a different finger.
One digit off. Okay.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, but anyway, that's what they were signaling. But that, it was all in fun. And Lanning's not scared. It was fun. One of his confidants I was standing close to on the sideline. They scored the first touchdown, and he pokes me. He says, "Watch this. Watch what's going to happen." He said he had a 2-point play dialed up. Something. And Utah was either ready or didn't give him the look, and they ended up kicking the thing. But,
didn't they do that in Seattle?
Yeah, they did do it in Seattle also.
It made the game goofy because it puts everybody off track.
The score off, yeah. So he had something ready this time, and they ended up being smart enough, didn't have the look, so they didn't try to force it. But I was really impressed again. They just keep rolling defensive linemen in there, and I would be remiss to say, while it was an absolute physical beatdown, Utah was anything but at full strength. I'm not making any excuses. The far better team won the game. There's no question about that. But Utah is not at full strength. And now you do wonder about them going down the rest of the season. It appears they're probably out of the Pac-12 championship game picture. But, hey, that's a balanced conference with a lot of good teams at the top. I think there are more good teams at the top there than in any other league. So, maybe not. How about this ACC Wheel of Destiny thing? Do you remember this? I know you're busy covering things. We used to have the big wheel that we spun on college football final.
I remember it. I'm going to match your game show reference, though, and just it had to be noted, and we were texting a little bit about this on Saturday. I didn't bring it up. So the NC State Clemson game is in flux, right? Yeah. So I am like, okay, I got to get to the CW, right? And now I don't know like the CW, and it doesn't auto-populate with like ESPN, ESPN2, like, YouTube kind of like is intuitive to what you go to. I don't watch a lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so the CW is not in my memory. So I'm like scrolling down. I remember actually saying to Kate, I was like, do you know where the CW is on like YouTube TV? I'm scrolling down. And then I see it, and there's like the last, so I check in the fourth quarter. Up next was Family Feud. That is like, on the guide. So, instead of going to the studio, as Dave Doran suggested, he would have actually had to go to the feud if after the game, if he did want to consult our fine guest picker Steve Smith, who caught a couple strays from Raleigh.
These coaches,
Coach
man.
Doran. Oh man. Oh, we talk about it all the time.
Brand,
we love
though.
the petty. They are petty creatures, man. All these guys, and that was a chef's kiss of petty. Like,
you know what would have been great? I love doing this. I can't remember if I sent this to you or if I sent it to another group of friends. Doran saying, that Steve Smith back in the studio, as he put it, could kiss his hindquarters. Dave, apparently, just because Steve, made a innocuous reference to NC State being a basketball school, and David Thompson believes that they are. But at any rate, he made this reference. What would have been great is if the sideline reporter from the CW had said, well, we're not going to the studio, and Doran had replied, oh, what's a CW? And then someone had cut in and said, we joined the latest episode of Dawson's Creek, already in progress. Right there, just disappeared from it. But
I'll say this: the CW's had elite games 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah,
so I don't think they actually pick. I think they inherit them, like the ones that aren't picked anywhere else. But I have been to the CW now 3 weeks in a row. It should start auto-populating now in my YouTube TV, because they have had. I'm not going to remember. There was one of the Georgia Tech upsets, the Virginia upset of North Carolina.
Yeah, they got that one.
And then was it Georgia? That was on ACC Network, I think. Georgia Tech, Miami. I don't think that was that. But the crew, CW crew, does a great job. They actually noted, we're here again, like with the world coming to us for the unexpected, exciting end of an ACC game.
Well, the thing is it was like Herbie and I have joked about. We used to, talk about those noon ACC window games and the noon
Jefferson Pilot
and Raycom.
Yep, Raycom.
And whoever else would do all those. The legendary Mike Hogwood banging around in the studio, waiting on somebody to get upset when they're on
Bandy,
the road
South Carolina. We interrupt.
And there, Nashville. Got an upset brewing there with the three Daves. That's what the CW is getting, and that becomes part of the fabric of the sport. It's kind of cool.
No question. No question. No, all like gentle prods aside, like that's I mean, a lot of people get the CW. A lot more people get the CW than get some of these, offshoot networks. So,
they've got pros calling the game too. I mean,
they do a great job.
Understood. They do a terrific job calling the games. But as far as being upset about everything, Kirby landed a blindside roundhouse kick at our guy Dan Mullen after the game. I don't know why Dan's like, I've been gone 2 years. The funny thing about the coaches and about our entire deal is that, if you're in a position that our number one path of loyalty is to the people who are watching the show. Mm-hmm. And so you owe it to them to say what you think, and you owe it to them not to put on a show and have a take that you don't believe, but you also owe it to them not to sugarcoat everything and say everybody's great and I wish they could all tie, because then everybody would be happy. So I mean, picking somebody to win and Doran getting upset at a legend like Steve Smith and Kirby, although knowing Kirby's got that, Kirby's got that little zinger thing. That's his sense of humor, So he's having, and he even said something like, I thought you were my friend or something. So there was probably a little playfulness.
That was more a jab than a shot.
He was just having fun. So
speaking of jabs, we got to bring Bill Connelly in here before he feels like we're taking a shot at him by not inviting him from the Zoom netherworld where he was.
I think Bill's hiding information from me, Pete. I was trying to get a little insight analytically yesterday about the Kirby Moore offense at Missouri, as I was kind of thinking ahead and looking ahead to Georgia. And he flat shut me down after one text, like no response.
There were two.
That's not true. Well, I got to go look right now and see. Let's see what we got. I think you shut me down. I was like, well, I'm not trying to steal your column, Bill. I'm just looking for a little insight here.
There were two, but the second one was kind of like,
no, you're right. It
continuation of the first. So
I apologize. I apologize. That's on me.
It has just been kind of baffling. The changes really just kind of have been more, kind of just rounding the edges instead of making any massive. But no, I'm not hiding secret information. I assure you.
I was like, okay, I overlooked it. I went down the street and had.
Did he send you a link to an ESPN Plus subscription?
Yeah, he did. Hey, Bill, that's been problematic lately too, but it finally worked again. I guess they got the bugs out. Pete and I were having the same issue. We tried to get to your thing. We'd log into the ESPN Plus, and it just went into this endless loop. Yeah,
you have a tip to end that, because I'm still in the loop.
The tip that I've been told works is just to contact the help desk and they'll get it taken care of very quickly. I end up saying that a lot on Twitter, actually, to people, and I feel bad.
Oh, so we weren't the only ones.
No, it's been like, I don't know if a bunch of people's subscriptions just renewed at the beginning of football season or something. I guess that's a possibility, but once the season started, it was pretty constant. So
I've got the bundle. I might bundle with
the bundle too.
Disney and Hulu and something else.
Disney Plus, man, that is the key to parenthood. Whew.
Yeah.
Our 12-year-old was all about the Marvel and the Disney stuff, and then just one day became too old decided she was too old for all of it and just stopped completely. It was you have that to look forward to in a few more years, but you got a little ways to go, I think.
Teddy Thamel refers to television as poo. He just points to it and says poo.
Okay.
Like Winnie the Pooh.
Like not as in poo, but as in Winnie the
Pooh. The honey pot.
That's better.
Winnie the Pooh, not the derriere type of poo.
Are you fluent? Can you do a Winnie the Pooh impression?
I can do a Winnie the Pooh impression necessarily. I mean, he just kind of is like a little bit of a giggler, like whoo.
No. I mean, you as the father, you should be embracing this and creating.
You
do all that.
We're a fan of.
Say as like Pooh would say, "Oh, hello there." That's it.
Oh, hello there.
Okay, pretty good. Not bad. What did you take from the weekend, Bill? What are the biggest things that you saw other than Pete mastering Winnie the Pooh?
Well, I was happy to actually see one of these upsets actually come to fruition, and not just because I got yelled at last week by a bunch of OU fans for questioning their defense. Although I enjoyed that on Saturday, I guess. But no, I mean, this whole season has been kind of defined by a bunch of favorites looking shaky and then winning anyway. And it's, because of that, we're set up for a really interesting November here. A lot of teams still have 0 or 1 losses, and the playoff race could go in a lot of different directions. But it was, from Auburn, Georgia on down, it was a bunch of, oh, wow, are we going to see something? Oh, never mind. The favorite just scored 2 touchdowns and put it away. Seeing Kansas it looked like that was going to happen again, and then Kansas completes the big 4th down and allows OU to go right back down the field, but makes that final stop. It was cool. Like the goalpost coming down, the unexpected is kind of part of the fabric.
The lake, come on, the lake.
I am not required to acknowledge anything about Kansas football, any specifics. In fact, every time I get excited for Lance Leipold, I get yelled at by my kind, I guess, but I just get to point out I have an exemption. I've been the biggest Lance Leipold fan in the world since he was at Whitewater, so I get to continue rooting for Leipold.
You did a big story last year there, right?
Yes,
yeah.
He's the one person I haven't ever jinxed. Usually when I go to your school and write about interesting things your coach is doing, you immediately go on like a 4-game losing streak. But I couldn't even jinx that with Kansas. So he's jinx proof at this point.
What do you make of Washington? And I want to start by saying I know Michael Penix had the flu. There was kind of the obvious hangover situation with Arizona State, though that seemed a bit extreme to me. No offensive touchdowns with that group. And then Saturday night, who knows what happens if Stanford receiver doesn't drop the 4th down pass on the trick play. I mean, maybe Washington still wins. I'm not going to say, they would have lost. But I've had a lot of faith in them, and I still do. But I do wonder, if they peaked, a little bit. Teams have peaks and valleys, and you hit that emotional high with that game against Oregon, and they haven't been able to get it back up to this point. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I'm still not worried about the offense. I mean, obviously the red zone failures against Arizona State were a problem, but really that was just, they fumbled like 4 times, and they've had a little bit of an issue with that this year, but it's still pretty random. And I'm not too concerned about the offense, but the defense now, When I mentioned OU's defense a second ago, like one thing I've been doing a pretty good job of these last couple of years is just kind of watching like who's overachieving or underachieving versus projections offensively, defensively, and whatnot, because it kind of allows you to spot trends or see into the future a little bit. OU was struggling in that regard. Washington's now underachieved defensively in 4 of the last 5 games. And one of those was Oregon. They ended underachieved by like 3 points. That wasn't that big a deal. But the Arizona game was, the Cal game was a warning sign. The 59-32 game. Arizona, maybe we didn't really know that suddenly they had an amazing quarterback behind center, and that was a little bit of a surprise. But Oregon was shaky. Stanford was beyond shaky. They just don't disrupt anybody. They tackle pretty well. Their secondary is pretty good. They don't make any run stops behind the line. They don't make any sacks whatsoever. They never blitz. It's a pretty passive bend don't break defense overall. And when you can't kind of force the issue there, you play a good offense, you're going to really struggle to ever make stops. The only reason they beat Oregon was because of the 4th downs. They didn't really ever make a traditional stop hardly, except for in like the 3rd quarter or whatever. But that I do think that's as we get into more and more important games against more and more good offenses. I mean, they played Oregon, but they got USC, they've got Oregon State, maybe Washington State will have found a rhythm again before then. You got to be able to force the issue a little bit, and Washington's defense does not do that at all.
Can we discuss the Oregon State game?
Because I'm going to admit I went to bed, and there was supposedly a gobsmacking fake punt call.
Yeah, a fake field goal.
Fake field goal.
Fake field goal was
right,
Bill. Yeah,
they would have had to walk it off. What, 30 yards?
Yeah. I think it was like at end of the half. Right?
End of the half. Okay.
Yeah, and 3 points that they really could have used a little bit later on.
Okay. So that was like a once a season time of whoa call.
I feel like we've had a lot of whoa calls this year, but maybe not that specific kind. Yeah. The other interesting thing about the Pac-12 right now is everybody like we thought was bad isn't necessarily bad now.
It's a great point.
Arizona changes quarterbacks and just absolutely ignites. Arizona State's defense is awesome now out of the blue. I mean, luckily for Washington, they don't have an offense, but it's been really interesting to see the ups and downs within that conference. Washington State's obviously trending very, very poorly at the moment, but the 2 Arizona schools are bouncing in the other direction. So it's been a really, really entertaining year. It makes me sad about everything. I've just been ignoring about everything that's coming down the pike in this regard with the Pac-12 and everything else. But it's been a really, really interesting year just for plot twists.
We mentioned the ACC Wheel of Destiny earlier. If you want to, I mean, most people understand and accept that you are a genius.
Sure.
But for those who doubt, you know how you can convince them right now? Explain Georgia Tech.
Yeah. No, there's, I just, if you're going to do something mediocre on average, like be memorable about it. And Georgia Tech has last, let's see, I was talking about overachieving and underachieving. Last 5 games.
That's what made me think of it. Actually, I'd seen these. Yeah.
Yeah. They've overachieved projections against Wake Forest by 28.5 points. Then they underachieved against Bowling Green by 29.5 points. Then they overachieved against Miami by 27 points. Then they underachieved against Boston College by 24 points, and then overachieved against North Carolina by 17 points. So on average, SP Plus has them nailed. It's just, average versus, standard deviation is a little bit of a different story there. They're a flawed team with athletes and a coach that doesn't mind taking some chances. And I guess this is the ultimate in volatility right here. You want high variance if you're an underdog team. You want to give yourself a chance to either win an upset or get blown out. And this is the most high variance team of all time.
And you know what? That team, first of all, they wrecked North Carolina's hopes, wrecked them. And guess who they play and what network they're on Saturday, Pete Thamel?
I would imagine on the Family Feud network.
They are on the CW. So craziness will ensue when the Ramblin' Wreck takes on the Who's. Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern time, which by the way, Virginia's Virginia's improved. Give them some credit too.
But they're the Arizonas. Sure. They are the Arizonas of the ACC. Suddenly, Virginia and Virginia Tech are overachieving quite a bit. Which I mean, that's fun. It's from a projection standpoint. I'd much rather my numbers get most stuff right, but it's a lot more fun when things just suddenly become completely different for a team 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 or whatever many games into the season. It's keeps you on your toes.
I get a lot of pushback. Pete, I don't know if you're getting this or not, but Herbie and I are especially getting a lot of "you hate Louisville." Well, I mean, that's just simply not true. It's sort of what we were talking about earlier, that you can't pick everybody to win and say everybody's great every week. Half
the team still lose, Rece? Is that what you're saying? Every week?
The team, that's what Lou Holtz said, that we came on the air for a college football final one night, and Holtz said, every week 50% of the teams are going to lose. And so I just sort of looked at him, looked back at the camera and said, I promise we're going to get more in depth later. But Louisville, that was a really impressive performance. Yep. What we said on Game Day Saturday proved to be true. Without Riley Leonard at a good clip, they didn't, it hurt their chances, but it was well beyond that. I mean, well beyond that in terms of dominance. What do you make of Louisville right now, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, their defense is kind of the main surprise here. Obviously, it fell apart against Pitt for whatever reason. But I mean, that's when you hire Jeff Brom, you assume you're going to get kind of creative and efficient, and you're going to do some fun things offensively. Defensively, who knows, really? But he's done a really good job of just crafting a super aggressive identity on both sides of the ball. They throw punches, they throw haymakers, and they're landing a lot more of them recently. And they're, I say haymakers, but they're not all like that Boston College game where it's just 40-yard pass after 40-yard pass. They're efficient now too. They ran the ball really because stopping Duke isn't as hard as it was a few weeks ago. Riley Leonard, every time he tried to plant on that ankle, it looked like he was about to fall over. It's been kind of awkward to watch these last couple of weeks, but running the ball that well on the Duke defense is ridiculously impressive. And they have a chance. I mean, basically the chaos teams left. I wrote this in my Sunday night column. If you're rooting for chaos down the stretch here, you're rooting for one of the SEC teams that plays Georgia, be it Ole Miss or Tennessee or Missouri. And Ole Miss and Missouri both have one loss still. Or you're rooting for Louisville because they have one loss. They can absolutely play themselves into a nice spot here. And they finish the year with Florida, potentially, if they keep winning, with Florida State in the ACC championship. So yeah, they're just a chaos team in general. They really, really are fun to watch. And I personally do not root against. I personally do not hate Louisville. I can't. Speak
unlike Rece, yeah.
I don't really know where that came from. It's been really strange. I think
they have kind of a salty fan base, Rece. It's just Louisville fans are a little salty.
Yeah, it's been kind of up and down. Yeah. My standard response to all of that stuff is always, I missed all the thank you notes for the nice stuff I said. $1 to Bill Rafter.
Oh yeah. No, they never remember that.
It's the one thing that is surprising about the ACC, Pete, is for inside track to the ACC championship game against Florida State, Louisville and Virginia Tech.
Yeah, no, it's unbelievable. To put a bow on Louisville, Brom really searched because they had some high moments at Purdue, including making the title game last year. But he had been searching before last season for that right piece at defensive coordinator. He went through quite a few. Bob Diaco made a quick cameo there. Their DC left for Wake two seasons ago. And they just never had quite found that piece right. And Brom had talked pretty openly about his struggles with that. Now he has old Ron English. Promoted him from on the staff. Ron English, former DC at Michigan, former head coach at Eastern Michigan. Mm-hmm. He's been around a little bit. And if you really look at Louisville, I think their defense might be the most surprising unit to me in college football this season. To think Louisville's scoring defense would be ahead of their scoring offense, pretty surprising, right? Especially with the way that Brom plays. Top 10 rush defense. Again, they have good players. But I give them credit for maximizing those players and putting them in position. I think like Ron English isn't like the sexiest name on the board, but that'd be a pretty good Broyles nominee. just for the work done there with what was given.
Yeah, he's making the most of a really good defensive line. They can get pressure without blitzing very much. And I was looking through the millions of stats I try to track in a given week. They're fourth in tackle success rate. They don't miss tackles.
Well,
Above all else, they do well. You can still kind of create some glitches downfield, like when they give up a good pass, it's a pretty big pass, lots of 20-yard gains. But that's the only way to break them right now. Their run defense is fantastic, and they're just better than most of the offensive lines they face. And that'll be super interesting against Florida State. Florida State's offensive, I don't want to pretend like it's still 2018 or whatever. Their offensive line has come a long way over the last couple of years. But if you're trying to list out potential weak spots for FSU, you might still try to start there, and Louisville might be able to take advantage of that.
I mean, it's really a fascinating thing because I think they have a trip to Miami, and Miami's very capable. But we talked about earlier in the season that the schedule was in their favor, and now they're taking advantage of it. And they're playing Virginia Tech this weekend on the quarterback. They've had some explosive runs, and Bashal Tootin has been, really good for them too. And Kyron Drones taking over has made Virginia Tech a little bit different. But I look, regardless, I almost want to bow up against the people just to tweak them and have some fun. But I think Louisville's really good. I did. Yeah. I know what they got mad about. They got mad about my whole "if you're not good enough, a loss will find you," because what I just said about the schedule is true. They missed the major perceived contenders in the ACC, but not quite good enough to get through it unbeaten. All I mean by that, and I think I've explained this 100 times, is if you're basing your assessment of what a team can accomplish solely on the fact that they miss teams X, Y, and Z on their schedule, that's not good enough. Yeah. You're going to lose to somebody, and you take Michigan for instance. Michigan is good enough. Now, Michigan may lose to Penn State, they may lose to Ohio State, but Michigan's not going to lose to Minnesota. They're not going to lose to Rutgers, and you're not going to lose, and I don't mean to be taking a shot at Louisville. They're not going to lose to Pittsburgh. So it's the one thing though is I noticed that Brom had said that it's sort of against his nature. They have, Plummer's thrown a bunch of interceptions or more than they would like. Maybe is a better way to put it. So, take some shots. They're going to run the ball too with Jamar Jordan, which is a really, really, really good idea.
Yes.
To run the ball with him.
He's been magnificent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's strange anytime you have a really, really good run game, but you stink in the red zone. But really, that's been Louisville's biggest. Their random turnover issues are one thing, but their red zone touchdown rate, they're 83rd in that. Their defense is actually 89th, despite being good defending the run. So that doesn't make much sense at all, but it is still an issue for them. And it's a point of vulnerability because, we can talk ourselves into Louisville being good enough to win out and play and beat Florida State. They also have to play those two hot teams that we just talked about from Virginia, and then Miami, and then Kentucky, who I still think is, obviously Kentucky's, falling victim to playing other really good teams right now. But I think they could still land some punches on a good team like Louisville as well. So it's their season is very much a lot of possibilities. I'm looking at a 17% chance of going 11-1 and an 8% chance of going 8-4. So lots of potential outcomes here.
As an aside, before we bounce out of here, Devin Leary suddenly looked good. Looked pretty good the other night. They got a tough call go against him. I saw on X or whatever we're supposed to call it now. I guess Stoops sent in a pretty extensive film review to the powers that be in the officiating in the SEC. Displeased a week after Heupel's displeased. Seems to be a lot of that connection going around when you're at the margins in these games and something doesn't quite bounce your way. Then you're gonna blame the officials, and but which sometimes they earn it. They earn the blame sometimes, but sometimes they don't. We will talk on Wednesday about Bill Connelly's Missouri Tigers and their opportunity. You think you got a season-altering upset on Saturday from Missouri's arch enemy in Kansas. Wait till you get a load of what might happen if Missouri could pull the shocker against Georgia. A little secret here is that old Kirby's not going to get caught unaware. They've done plenty of work on Missouri,
not.
as you would expect during the bye week. We'll talk about that. Look ahead to Game Day's trip back to Alabama for a second time. I'm just going to go ahead and say it right now. A challenge to people at Alabama, the fans. There is no place in this point in the Game Day season with the crowds we've had at places like Utah, which was fantastic, at places like Washington, which was unbelievable. Ohio State, very solid for a noon game. If you are the mecca of college football, which Alabama fans believe that they are, show the people. Let's see what you've got. Let's bring something Saturday morning on the quad on College Game Day. Before then, let's see what you have. Show the backing. Your team's going to need it. They're going to need it against that LSU team on Saturday night. Bill, always a pleasure. Pete, great talking to you. Glad to have you back on the podcast. Exemplary work on the Michigan story. Thanks for listening to the College Game Day podcast. Back with an episode on Wednesday. Easiest way to not have to keep up with such things is to subscribe so that right there on your fancy mobile device, it's just there for your listening pleasure. Talk to you soon.